Thank you for joining us on our Q&A. So here is where you ask any question, really, regarding Christianity, not political questions or any other thing. But any question with Christianity, and it can go theological, it can go ethical, that is how we live our lives, all right? But you can also ask a question in relation to the sermon if you need some clarification, if you disagree with anything there. Or maybe you want to question anything about City Church, about positions that we take, or something you disagree with a particular position that we take and you want to know why we take it. So this is the time to be able to ask those questions. I know there was a question that was submitted last week, but the question Q&A had already ended. Maybe I think there was a delay and all of that, so that's come in this week. If you want to send a question, there's a WhatsApp number that will probably be in the comment section of your viewing platform. Or, the comment section, you can just put the question there, Facebook, YouTube. So I'll be alerted if there's any. But I've been sent the question from last week. Now, for those here, there's a roving mic. Oh, Toki has a question. Good. There's a roving mic. Can we shut that door? There's a roving mic, and you can ask any question. Again, no question is silly, no question is stupid. All questions are welcome, and we'll do our best to attempt. We may not be able to, if we don't know the answer to that. So maybe I should go with Toki's question first.
Okay.
And any other question any other question here, apart from Toki? Okay, Toki, go ahead.
Okay. You've mentioned before that word of knowledge is not there's somebody here. So my question, my question is, as in how you classify there's somebody here.
All right. Yeah. Okay. It's just that description. There's somebody here. All right. Okay. So that's one. Olumide has a question.
Okay, John 15.
Yes.
The parable of it wasn't a parable. The vine and so I'm asking this because somebody is watching and we had an argument about it. So is it about Christians, even though in some ways, it speaks, but on the issue of assurance of salvation, which thankfully you spoke about today, does it mean that, if you're saved, truly saved by God, you can be cut off? Yeah.
So, you said that, but people need to be sure about what you mean, because there's a part where it says that the branches, so I'm the vine, you are the branches, and then the branches that don't produce fruit, that they are broken off and they are cast into the fire. So the point is, if we are the branches and he's the vine and we are Christians, and then the branches can be cut off and then thrown into the fire, then that would mean that, at least the question is, does that mean that a Christian can still be, a genuine Christian can still be condemned eternally? And so the assurance of one's salvation. Okay. Any other? Okay. So the question from last week is this. It's a very serious question by Ifeoluwa. She says, good morning. Regarding the ongoing reports of sexual abuse in the church, it's apparent that a lot of pastors or church leaders get away with their crimes. So my question is, in the event that, God forbid, any leader in City Church is found guilty of sexual predation, what will be done about it? How do you intend to ensure that City Church is a safe space for women and children alike? Background. All right. Somebody will say, but what about men? It shouldn't be safe for men too. No, I'm not. I wasn't affirming it. By the way, when you say thank you. All right, so let's go with Toki's own. So when Toki says something like, he has the description, he said, well, word of knowledge, well, I've said that word of knowledge, and he says it's not, there's somebody here. So what he means by there's somebody here is that it's a practice in many churches who believe in gifts of the Spirit that are used instantaneous. I don't even know whether I should use instantaneously, but gifts of the Spirit that are more, what's the word? More immediate, rather than come through a process, right? So when you read 1 Corinthians 12, there's something called the word of knowledge. And so in a lot of these churches, what would happen is that somebody would say something like, there's someone here who came in, you didn't want to come to church, but someone begged you to come. You're wearing size 12 shoes. You're wearing a white shirt. So it becomes quite specific. And then the person may give some kind of assurance or something that God is telling them to do. Now, it's called the word of knowledge because it's saying the way they would interpret it is that you have knowledge about the person that was not supplied to you by any way of learning you didn't know before. So that gift word of knowledge is what is happening when somebody says, there's somebody in this place that this. So I've, over the years, said that I don't believe that's what the word of knowledge is. So he's saying, clarify what, therefore, that thing is. So the first question is, I would say, you didn't ask this, but the first question is that thing genuine? Is there a genuine gift to it? And my only answer to that would be, I've seen it on display. I've seen fake. There were some guys. There was this guy, Robert Tilton, in the 80s, 90s. Literally, what he would do in a big crowd, right? He will have had his people move around, and they just ask some people some questions, some random sort of kind of thing, ushers. But they had mics connected to them, so they will have asked some of these questions. They had mics, and they could identify where the person is seated. So they wrote the person is seated and all of that. So all that information has been given to them behind the scenes. So by the time you wake up and I said, there's somebody in this row that's something, so we know that they are charlatans. But again, the abundance of witnesses, I've seen it on display. Like genuine one, it has been done to me. And nobody came with any mic or whatever. And this person didn't come, it wasn't resident in the church that I was part of. The person came from another country. And then there have been people who I remember prayed over me, laid hands over me, and then started saying some stuff that they shouldn't have known about. Like I didn't share with anybody at all. And they weren't doing guests. Like when you say something like, thus said the word of the Lord, I feel like I have a word of knowledge that tomorrow is going to, most likely will be sunny. The sun will rise tomorrow. I think the sun will rise around 7 a.m. Okay. It's not those generic ones that, no, I mean much more specific. So, first of all, implicitly, I'm going to work from the standpoint of that phenomena exists. Where do I classify that phenomena? I classify it under the prophetic. But the prophetic, I think the prophetic, when we think about the gift of prophecy is not one specific thing. It's a host of things. So one example from Scripture that I always give on this is when the soldiers were captured Jesus, and they started slapping him, and he had a blindfold, and they said, what? Prophesy to us who hit you. So in other words, it was revelatory. It was like it is, or Jesus was with the woman at the well. Right? And many people say, oh, that was a demonstration of the word of knowledge. But follow it. When he told her about her husband, the 5 husbands, and then the one that she's living with now, that is not her husband, what did she say? She said, I perceive that you are what? A prophet. So it falls under this a collection of gifts, prophetic. And I've said, and I think I'll teach on this one of these days. But you remember when they started speaking in tongues on the day of Pentecost? And Peter says this is fulfillment of what Joel has said, that in the last days your sons and daughters will prophesy. The speaking in tongues was seen as prophecy. When Agabus talked about the famine that was going to come, he said he prophesied. So one is prediction, one is speaking in tongues, the other one is talking about revealing knowledge that was not, you see, so there's a collection, I think there are probably like 7 or 8 you can actually identify in Scripture of ways to talk about prophecy. So I'll just see it as one of the prophetic gifts. For those who are thinking, what then is word of knowledge? Word of knowledge for me is the unique gift of people who are able to consume complex and voluminous information and, articulate it as well. All right? So you are going to be a theologian. Theologians have word of knowledge, basically. And then closely associated with that is word of wisdom. But word of wisdom is using the word of knowledge and being able to apply it to specific situations. So people who do counseling have to have the word. If you're a good counselor, you have to have the word of wisdom. Okay, so hope that clarifies that. Olumide. John 15. Yeah, John 15. Yeah, so first of all, I would say I've preached on this message before. You may not remember, but you were there. It was in 2017. So that's why we can't remember. It's on the very first series that we had here, the book of John, Believe and Live. And so just check it out. I think it's called, you can just search with the scriptures. It's there, John 15, and the truth, something. But it was there. And so it addressed this issue. But I think the way we address it, first of all, scriptures all have to, if scriptures have spoken to a particular issue somewhere else, I can't just go to one place and just say, this settles it. We have to make scriptures harmonize. Now, first thing to say is that John 15 is rooted in, John 15 is not trying to answer the question as per whether we can lose our salvation or not. Many times we enter into interpretive difficulties because we go to the text trying to force the text to ask our own question, whereas the text is answering another question. Now, it's answering another question. It can still answer that question of ours, but we need to understand what it's trying to do so that we can carefully ask our own. So the first thing is that Jesus is trying to explain how he's moving, God's people is moving from Israel to him. So when you see certain scriptures about Israel as the vine that God planted, he's now saying, I am the true vine. So I am the true Israel, the anticipated Israel. And that's why the analogous metaphor in Paul, so John uses the vine and branches. Paul will say, I am the head, you are the body. So in other words, that God's people are now formed in him. Okay, that's first thing. Second thing is that if you then notice that the old people of God, the Israelites, there were people who were part of Israel, but were not really part of Israel. Paul addresses that in Romans chapter 2, that there are those who call themselves Jews, but they are not true Jews. He's saying they are Jews ethnically, but they are not Jews spiritually. So there's this phenomena about people who belong but are not truly belonging. In 1 Corinthians 10, it talks about how those who came out of Egypt but still perished in the wilderness, and that we should learn an example from them so that we don't perish likewise. So who is he addressing? He's addressing people who are attached to the people of God, but in spirit aren't attached to the people of God. They belong in one way. They truly belong in one way. But in another way, they don't really belong. So in what way do they belong? They belong in their own way. They've attached, or there is some kind of natural phenomenon. So, I am born as a Christian. If you ask my children today, if we're filling a form for my children, let me say my 4-year-old, if they put on a form, what religion? Islam, Christianity, traditional religion, Hinduism, Buddhism, other. What should I put? What should I put, or what will you put? Christianity, right? Because he was born in a Christian home, he goes to church, his parents read the Bible for him, Bible stories. So he's connected. But from another standpoint, a biblical standpoint of truly who is a Christian, he's not a Christian. So somebody can be born as an Israelite. He's a Jew. The question is, does he have the circumcision? He may be circumcised outside on the foreskin, but as Deuteronomy 30 tells us, is he circumcised in the heart, spiritually? So what John is showing is that if you are going to really be truly part of me, there is a test. So you may tell yourself, by virtue of connection in one way or the other, I am a true branch. And he's saying, okay, on last day I'll know. But here's the proof though. I can know if you produce fruit or not. My Father prunes, so suffering comes, and the true branches produce fruit when the pruning comes. That is, the suffering and the testing comes. But the false ones don't. And I will separate. So you now go into parables of the kingdom. Take Matthew 13. That he's going to say the parable of the dragnet. All right, he casts the net into the sea, and then he gathers fish and he gathers. But that on the final day, what is he going to do? He's going to separate them. But they were all in the net together in the first place. And you go to the parable of the sower. It now says, there are those that believed. But when suffering came, on account of the word, on account of being attached, they fell away. To show you that they were never truly part in the first place. So they are part in one way. But they are also not part in a true sense, in a deep sense. And it's throughout scriptures. On that final day, some people come and meet me and say, in your name we did this, in your name we did that, in your name we did that. Okay, but you said I never knew you. But they will describe themselves as Christians. And sometimes we would even describe them as Christians. So the assurance of salvation is true. That is, a genuine Christian will not lose their salvation. The question is, are they genuine? All right. And now to Ife Oluwa's question. It's not, what do you think about, the question is not, what do you think about sexual predation in the church? That's not the question. The question is, if, God forbid, that happens in City Church, what's going to happen for the leaders? And what do we do to keep it safe? I should say this, Ife Oluwa, let me not lie to you. There was a pastor that fell. I don't want to call the name because, as you said, there are numerous ones. And it came out, this year. And for about 2 weeks, I was so discouraged. And this always happens when a few ones come out. I remember in 2018, another one that held in high regard for years, as long as I've known. Very influential. One of the most influential pastors, I would say, in the world. And a lot of people don't know his name, but some of the innovations he brought into, just the fact that you're sitting down on chairs and not pews, it was because of this guy. And many people don't know his name. And, it came out that he had, over years, since the 80s, that he had had terrible things. That brought me down. It brought me down. And the truth is, I hope I'm not foolish enough to say, I hope I'm not, that when we see that, when that thing happens, and I say, can you imagine, useless them, you see, when they don't do this. Because, I came back from teaching recently some Christian leaders in a place, and I said, Paul will tell you straight away, if Paul says in 1 Corinthians, both 1 Corinthians 9 and 1 Corinthians 10, he says that I don't want to preach to others and then myself I'll become disqualified. Then in 1 Corinthians 10, he said, if you think you stand, take heed lest you fall. Paul is saying that about himself. In other words, the moment you start to say as a Christian leader that this can never happen to me, you've just taken the first step to show your foolishness that it could happen to you. So many times when this thing happens, I won't lie to you, it gets me, especially if somebody I'm emotionally connected to, it gets me down, it gets me a bit scared. I remember 2018, when that one happened, I called 3 of the staff inside. I said, if this thing happens to me, you people are to blame because you've not held me accountable. So what do we do? Accountability. Now, I want to talk about accountability because it has different levels. I do think, hopefully, why City Church, why we do believe in raising and developing leaders and actually giving those leaders a voice Yesterday, we had our final leadership meeting of our broader leadership, deacons, gospel community leaders, and the main leaders of the church. We had our final meeting of the year last year. Today, the main leadership of the church will meet. The reason why we do that, and leaders have voices, and we should be able to speak to each other, the reason why we allow for questions like your question, the reason why we do all of those things is to always try to keep us humble. Is to put structures in place to keep us humble. Is for somebody to be able to identify something in your life and say, this is what I feel you need to watch this. When we gather today as leaders to meet, the first thing we always open with, we have a number of questions where we confess sin. And we're trying to nip in the bud before it grows into being something big. So part of the ways we ensure safety for the people is that we ensure spiritual safety for ourselves. And that comes with structures here. On account of what happened in the one I said that happened this year, I called my wife and I said, babes, I hope I have given you every reason to trust me as a person. I said, however, it's your responsibility. If you start seeing me taking calls, my phone rings, I take a call, and I leave the room. You see it happen the first time, you see it happen the second time. I said, for you to ask me, I said, you have the right to be suspicious. And that doesn't mean you are not trusting me. I said, but you have the right to be suspicious. Why? Because there is a pattern of behavior that has entered into our lives that was not there for the past 10 years of marriage. So you questioning me about it is not first, I don't trust you again. Haven't I given you reason to trust? No, there is something that has happened that's changed. I said, if I leave the house, for instance, and I tell you, you say, where are you going? I say, somewhere. I'll say, I'll be back. Like, when has that happened in our marriage? Never has it happened. So you should question, what am I saying? My wife also is an accountability structure. So there are leadership structures, there's the church structure. But one of the things I said I was teaching a group of leaders somewhere else. With all of that having been said, all of that, and I think that thing does a lot, and this is why we also try to emphasize accountability for church people, why you shouldn't just live your Christian life on your own. Because there's a real enemy. And he tries to deceive, he first deceives you into, before he deceives you into sin, he deceives you into the fact that you are okay. You're okay on your own. But with all of that being said, with all these structures, I told my wife, I said, with all the structures I have in place, I still feel like if I want to commit terrible sin, I can still do it. That I can still find a way. And I feel that there's no accountability structure that is 100% proof that then doesn't start touching, it doesn't start entering certain spaces. For instance, some people will say that they can never meet with a woman alone, in a room alone. While I think there's some wisdom there, I often, even after church, I can ask, there's somebody I want to talk to in confidence, and it's a lady. I feel like I should still be able to do that. People say they can never carry, they will not be in a car with a woman that is not their wife alone. I feel like there should still be some ability to do that. So my point is that if you start going down that road, I think it starts to affect Christian ministry in some sense. So that there is no accountable system that is 100% proof that doesn't start affecting something else. So, with all your accountability systems, with all your accountability structures, each leader is still responsible to believe that the God we talk about is not an abstraction. God is a being, he's a person. That is after everything. When I close my eyes at night, do I still believe this God? Do I still believe that this God watches everything I do? Those are all the things that I would say that we try to emphasize to keep each other. So my devotions, regular devotions, my weekly devotions, all of those things. So that is first how we try to keep each other safe, by stopping the breeding of predators. That's how you address it. You have to stop the breeding of predators. That is from an individual standpoint. But from a policy, systemic standpoint and all of that, if a leader should fall, there are disciplinary measures. And I have to say, if it's sexual predation, that one's hard though, at least for this church. Like, while I don't want to say somebody should never, ever, ever be allowed on the pulpit again or in ministry and all of that, I do think when a minister falls in that way, before they can be restored back, it will take a while. Because it doesn't mean that they can't be genuinely repentant. They can be genuinely repentant and God will forgive. That's the message of grace. But them functioning in a capacity where people can trust them and the fact that their ministry depends on people trusting them, that's another question. So a rush sort of bringing them back into the pulpit is a big problem. I know one of the people that fell recently is, sort of has already set the timeline. It was discovered just a few weeks ago and has already set the timeline for when it's coming back, which is in January, because people have been begging him to come back, that they need the word. These things they're shames. So, God forbid it happened to me. This is why, again, I joked, I don't know whether I was in this somewhere, but I don't own the church. I just don't own the church. I can be fired. It's not, I can be fired. The problem with some places is that the pastor cannot be fired. Like, they know. Some of the people that can fire me, they're here. I'm seeing one. Right? As in, collectively. So the decision then doesn't lie with me. So you have to have disciplinary measures for those pastors. That's one of the systems. Second one is, if it's children, I've said this repeatedly, or I'll repeat it over and over again. If it's a child, that one is a criminal. Now, if it's rape also, that's criminal. So anywhere it's criminal, first things first, we're reporting to the authorities. First things, and I told people, I said, even if it's my best friend here, I will cry as I'm taking you to the police station. I'll be crying, and I'll be crying as I'm taking you, but to the police station we will go. And if it's corrupt police, I would pull, Kukuma have lawyers. I'll pull everything to ensure that the person is prosecuted well. There are lawyers. Danke is here. There are plenty of them. Pelumi himself will even put back our law. Emmanuel too will put back. Like we have more lawyers in this church than any other profession. So we'll ensure that person is prosecuted. We'll ensure they feel the weight of the law. And then, as they are feeling guilty, we'll go to minister Christ to them in the prison and take whatever. But that is a zero tolerance policy on that. And it's crime, and it's even out of our hands. For us to conceal it, we'll even be acting against the law. So we can't do that, but also we have a higher standard. So there's no one way of solving this. You have to stop the breeding of predators, but you don't stop the breeding of predators by stopping the breeding of predators. You try to want to breed godly men and women, and you do that by accountability structures, but no accountability structure is 100% proof. So hopefully you want to also emphasize our individual accountability before God. But where these things are discovered, it's going to, the price to pay is absolutely heavy. It's very, very heavy. And hopefully these things act as deterrents, but also they act as, we also have not just deterrents, but we also give people life so that they don't. But finally, I've just said there's a responsibility for you, for the members of the church, to pray. Not just try to hold accountable, but to pray for your leaders. Paul always asks, please. And I'll ask, please pray. Not just pray for God, more anointing on him. I want that. Not just pray for God, protect him. I want that. But pray, God, uphold him. Uphold Moses. Let Femi love his wife. Let Yemi love his wife. Keep their eyes from evil. Don't allow them to be deceived. Don't allow them to get proud. I'm a product if I've done anything good or if I'm standing in any way, honestly, it is the product of many people's prayers. And that's the best thing I think you can give to your leaders. All right. Thank you very much. God bless you all. And next week, we'll continue. We'll finish our series on